New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
From the New Thought Media Network, this is the Conscious Reality Show with your host, Sarah Stevens-Nichols, where conversation plus intention reveals a new reality. Every week, Sarah and her guests will discuss what they know and what they don't. Experimenting in front of everyone with what else is possible. I'm Sunny Child, and here is your host, Sarah Stevens-Nichols.
Thank you, Sunny. Well, I'm Sarah Stevens-Nichols, and I am thrilled to welcome you to the third episode of the Conscious Reality Show. We've had two versions of this show so far. First, our first guest, Russ Hahn, we had him on talking about his work and what he liked about his work. And then I did a little woo-woo sort of processy thing with him at the end. And then our second guest, Leah Booth, was full woo. The entire show was me doing a consciousness session with her on her body pain. And both Russ and Leah have reported that they have had massive forward movement in their lives and their bodies since that show. Today is going to be a predominantly non-woo, but very interesting show. But we'll get to that in just a second. I want to tell you about, I do hot yoga about 3 times a week at 6 a.m. And for a couple of years, I've had a preferred position in the room of where I set up my mat. It's easy to get that position because there's almost no one who gets up for hot yoga at 6 a.m. And I just always gravitate to that position, and I love it. Well, I just realized 2 classes ago, after years of being there, that there is up right in front of me, next to the wall, a statue of the Hindu god Ganesha. And behind me, up on the wall, is a little sculpture of an angel mermaid with her hands like in a namaste roll. And I realized that those are the only such spiritual things in the entire room. And I'm there between these two, and that they could help me with because they both appear very powerful. I know Ganesha is. Ganesha, by the way, if you don't know, is the Hindu god with the head of the elephant, who is the patron of beginnings, wisdom, and good fortune. So two times ago, I started asking the mermaid angel and Ganesha to help me with different poses. And I've been able to balance and do things way better than I did before. Well, what that makes me realize is that a lot of times I am supported fully above, below, in front, behind, and I don't know. I don't even notice that there's support there. I don't even know to bring that into my world. Well, one person who has supported me fully throughout 34 years of marriage is our guest today, Bill Magavern. I'm reading his name as if I don't know it. Bill is an environmental leader nationally and in California, and he's going to talk about what's at stake for the environment in this presidential election, and also what those of us who are California voters or are interested in California, which we all really should be, some California ballot propositions Bill's accomplished a real lot as an environmental advocate in Washington and Sacramento and California, and he has played a crucial role in enacting and implementing groundbreaking California laws to reduce carbon emissions and also a leading role in getting dirty trucks and cars off the road and maybe airplanes out of the sky too. And he also happens to be my husband, as I mentioned, and the father of our 2 children. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you. It's great to be your third guest.
Yes, what a treat. This is so funny. I have various questions since I'm leaving town this afternoon about the state of our house and things like that, but I'm going to save those for after the webcast. So earlier this year, when asked what was at stake, several months ago, when asked what was at stake in the US presidential election for the environment, you were widely quoted as saying, "It's not too early to panic." So are you still panicking? And what's at stake?
Oh, I'm panicking even more.
Okay.
And of course, I urge people to, to put those emotions to use and make sure that you're voting and doing everything you can to elect Kamala Harris and defeat Donald Trump, because really our climate is changing. We've seen devastating hurricanes in the east. Right now we are again under the threat of wildfires here in California. We've had cycles of drought. We've had extreme heat. This is the hottest year in recorded human history, and probably the coolest year for the rest of our lives, because it will only get hotter. And the world hasn't done a great job of responding to and preparing for climate change, but there are some possibilities of actually marshaling a response, but it's hard to imagine that happening without the United States taking a leadership role. And under the Biden-Harris administration, we've seen monumental legislation that is getting renewable energy and zero-emission vehicles deployed, and leadership on the world stage. And if we have another 4 years of a climate denier in the White House, most of that progress gets halted. There's some that can still go forward with what's been put in motion, but we'll see the rest of the world saying, well, the US isn't willing to clean up its act, and that will have a devastating effect on the future of our climate. And, we will see far worse impact in the developing world, where people don't have the resources that we have here in the US. In California, what that would mean is, more droughts, more wildfires, worse heat waves, and efforts at the federal level to block and stymie a lot of the groundbreaking policies that California has put in place, where we've been a leader nationally and actually look to around the world for some of the actions that we've taken to reduce the harmful emissions that cause both local air pollution and climate change. We've been particularly a leader when it comes to the biggest source, both in California and nationally, of air pollution and climate change, which is our transportation system, because California has been a leader in cleaning up cars and trucks. We're trying to clean up trains if the federal government will get out of the way. We're trying to clean up shipping, and this is all in the works, and a lot of it is at risk if we have a hostile federal administration, which we saw the last time Trump was in office.
How does that work, like practically speaking, if we have a hostile administration? What's sort of some of the nuts and bolts of how it actually affects the environmental policies?
Well, at the national level, the Clean Air Act is probably the most successful law ever to improve public health. And studies have documented that it saved billions of dollars in health costs. Extremely successful. one of the great features for California is the Clean Air Act allows for California to be the only state to actually set stricter standards when it comes to what we call mobile sources of air pollution. And again, that's cars, trucks, buses. It's even smaller pieces of equipment like leaf blowers and lawnmowers, which actually emit a shocking amount of air pollution. And for most of those categories of equipment, California is the only state that can go stronger than the federal government, but the other states then can choose to opt into California standards. So we now have something like 17 states that are following us when it comes to standards for cleaner cars, for example, several that are doing that now for trucks. But before even California can start enforcing these policies, we need an approval from the US EPA. This was never controversial until George W. Bush was president.
Okay.
We had scores of these approvals were granted by EPA. Bush objected to our clean car standards. When Obama was elected, those standards were approved and became essentially national standards. And then Trump came in and tried to revoke that approval. And the litigation on that was still going on at the time that Biden defeated him. So, Project 2025, which a lot of folks have probably heard about, explicitly says that the goal of the Republican administration would be to essentially silence California, take away what is a right that's in law for California to act to reduce our own air pollution under the Clean Air Act.
Wait a minute, Bill. I thought Donald Trump and the Republicans believed in states' rights. You're saying they don't believe in our right to clean air?
They do, except when it conflicts with their interest in taking a lot of money from the oil companies and other fossil fuel companies. And then the states become much less important than the fossil fuel industry does.
Wow. That is pretty scary. I know there's, tons of stuff out there on hedging, watching the horse race and who's ahead in the polls and who's this and who's that and what the chances are. How do you feel about it at this point? How do you feel about the chances of the Democrats retaining the White House?
Well, I don't have any particular insights, but I would just say nobody should feel too confident and nobody should give up hope. It really could go either way. It looks like all 7 swing states could go one way or another. And if they all go one way, then that's actually a pretty large electoral college majority. If they split, it could be really close in the electoral college. It will probably be very close in the popular vote. So, people may get jaded to hearing this every 4 years, but the future is on the ballot. And, frankly, it's hard to see how this country could really withstand another 4 years of Trump. That's definitely true for the climate. I think it's also true for democracy.
Speaking of democracy in general, one thing you have said to me privately that I actually somehow haven't gotten as much reassurance from the newspapers on is that the fact that Biden is in office now, go into this election, makes it a lot less likely that Trump is able to pull the kinds of shenanigans he did last time. Shenanigans is a very light word and makes it sound fun, and it wasn't fun at all, that staging a coup. But that Trump is less likely to be able to carry out his threats at this time if it's a very close election. What have you read about that, or what's your belief based on what you've heard?
Well, I think they're trying different kind of shenanigans, basically. There are voter suppression efforts that the Trump campaign is, very heavily engaging in. They're trying to remove voters from the rolls who have been qualified registered voters for years and years. And you're hearing about people who get thrown off the voter rolls because they have the same name as someone else. There is actually audio tape of Republican officials saying that they want to target people based on the ethnicity of what their names sound like to try to challenge them as voters. And they want to intimidate people into not voting. So that's part of it. They will challenge people. I think if you look at the swing states, the voting machinery is in pretty safe hands in most of them. I think it's probably at most risk in Georgia because the far right state legislature there has empowered a state board of elections, which is dominated by people who are very professed Trump loyalists. Some have even said they're looking for jobs in a future Trump administration. There was just a decision yesterday that said that the counties in Georgia could not refuse to certify the results. But that's the kind of thing I think we could see is election officials who are loyal to Trump instead of loyal to the vote of the people may try to block results, may try to interfere with them. The same state board in Georgia ordered that all votes be hand counted, which is raises potential for a lot of error, as well as obviously a lot of delay. So there's a lot of shenanigans that could go on. What I'm not that worried about is, after the Electoral College meets and votes, I don't think there will be a problem in having that vote accepted by Congress, which is where Trump and Giuliani and John Eastman, another one of his lawyers, tried to muck with the process last time and tried to prevail on Mike Pence to interfere. I mean, for one thing, the vice president now is Kamala Harris, so you don't have to rely on a Mike Pence to prove his loyalty to the Constitution, which he actually did in that case. But also the Electoral Vote Count Act, which had a lot of ambiguity and was partly a cause of the confusion 4 years ago, has been reformed in a bipartisan manner. So it's a lot more straightforward this time. So we get to that point where the Electoral College has acted and the Supreme Court hasn't intervened, I'm not worried about the counting Congress. On the other hand, if there's no majority in the Electoral College, then the president will be picked by the House of Representatives. And that vote is not based on each member of the House having a vote. It's based on each delegation having a vote, which means it will be dominated by Republicans.
Yeah, that is scary. All right, thank you. Thanks for bringing us up to speed. Sunny, you had a question?
I have a question. Hey there, Bill. Nice to see you. I'm curious about, given your commitment to the process and your encouragement, what kinds of things you've seen happening or you're participating in that is, getting folks to vote in the first place? Because this is an election where things are, feeling a little scary. And the more people that vote, the better. And there's a lot of throwing up of hands and such. So can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing out there that gives you a little hope?
Sure. And, Sarah, to her credit, drove all the way to Nevada last week, which is a swing state.
Yep,
and
I did.
And went door to door talking to people about why they should vote for Harris. And I know a lot of Americans are doing that. It's interesting. The Democrats have really invested in their ground game this time around. And, conventional wisdom is that the ground game, the sort of grassroots get out the vote operation, which starts with identifying who your voters are, persuading people to be one of your voters, and then turning them out to actually vote, whether by mail or at the polls, conventional wisdom is that, that can matter 1 to 3 percentage points. And, this race could easily fall within that margin, so it might make a huge difference. The Republicans started a lot later, but they have a huge investment. I just heard on the radio this morning that Elon Musk alone has put $75 million into canvassing for Trump. So, some of the experts, particularly on the Democratic side, are saying, well, they started too late, and that sort of paid canvassing doesn't make much of a difference. But I'm not sure we really know. This changes every year. Of course, in 2020, Democrats were not going door to door because of COVID. So, you may see an improvement now that that kind of operation is back up and running, but who knows? Another strategy.
Let me jump in on one thing, just that if there is anyone listening who is on the fence about whether to go to one of the key states where it's really close and do work, I do getting out the vote. I really highly encourage that you do. I think if every person makes a difference, it's just any one individual who's out might not feel like they take that many people literally to the polls. But when it adds up to hundreds and hundreds and thousands of volunteers knocking on doors, that could really make the difference. And I also had a blast doing it when I went to Nevada. And by the way, it is pronounced Nevada. And so if you go to Nevada, pronounce it Nevada. They do not cotton to you going to the door and saying Nevada. And in Oregon, they don't cotton to you going to the door and saying Oregon, but it isn't considered one of the swing
Well,
states.
of course, we're lucky in Oregon to where I am living to have vote by mail as that's all there is. And as a result, we have a better voter turnout. And I wanted to turn our attention to the California ballot, because I think the other thing that motivates at least me and the people I talk to isn't just the national election, but what's going on in one state or one's county or one city, and what the local issues are that are extremely important. So I'm hoping that we can talk about some of that today, Bill, and I'm going to take all of that off stage. So thank you.
I am about to ask Bill about that, but I did want to say that I'm just in terms of a fun anecdote. Two of our neighbors are going to Arizona for a few days this month separately, to do get out the vote operations. And our neighborhood has taken a collection to help fund them. And it's amazing how much the people who are donating money to help them go are so happy, because they're not going to Arizona, but they love being able to help someone else go to Arizona. And there are multiple organizations like Seed the Vote, which is what I went with, that are doing really great work in the so-called battleground states. I like a less warlike image. I preferred the term swing state back when that was there, even though I know it's a battle. I did cut you off earlier, Bill. Was there something you wanted to say before we just moved to California ballot?
Just following up on what you just said, another option for folks who want to help and want to contribute some funds is to contribute to organizations in the swing states that are getting the vote. And, you can do that either to the types of organizations that are doing partisan GOTV efforts, like See the Vote, which is great. Or if you want to make a tax-deductible contribution, you can do that to nonpartisan organizations that are engaging with voters. One that I particularly love is the New Georgia Project, which was founded by Stacey Abrams, and Senator Raphael Warnock was also on their board. And they're particularly focused on registering and turning out young voters of color in Georgia who can really make a difference. There's a group in Wisconsin called Wisdom. So, these are nonpartisan groups are registering and turning out voters.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So yes, let's pivot, as everyone likes to say these days, to California ballot. What should California voters, or the rest of the country, since we always do it first, what's most confusing or important on the California ballot this year that you'd like to take us into?
We have 10 statewide ballot measures this year, which is, I think, about average for California. So, I mean, it's a lot. It can be kind of confusing. Some years we have even more. A few that I'll highlight are, in order to pass what's called a general obligation bond, allowing the state to borrow money for a particular purpose, that has to be put on the ballot. So we have 2 of these this year for, I think, important causes. Proposition 2, which is a school bond, and Proposition 4, which is a climate bond. And I've done some work on the climate bonds in my day job with the Coalition for Clean Air. We're supporting it. These are, if you're going to borrow money, which is, always an if, because it has to be paid back with interest, I think these are 2 causes that are well worth supporting. We need modernized and maintained school facilities so that our children can learn. And we need to prepare California for the changing world that we're in physically because of climate change. And making sure that when we have wildfires, that they don't become the out of control catastrophic mega fires, which we've experienced far too often with great loss of life and property. Preparing our water system for the cycles of drought and flood that we've been having. Preparing habitat so that our wildlife has a place to go as the climate changes. Preparing communities for the extreme heat events that we're having. So that's Proposition 4, the climate bond.
Okay.
We also have a Prop 5, which relates to bonds in that it would lower the threshold for approving a local bond for affordable housing or other local infrastructure. Right now, a local government to pass such a bond has to get a 2/3 vote, which empowers a minority to have a veto over, what might be necessary resources, especially housing costs are way too high in California. So there's a great need for affordable housing. So we want our governments to be able to issue bonds to pay for that housing. And this measure, Prop 5, would lower the threshold to 55%. So you still have to go over majority, but it's much more doable than the 2/3, similar to what we've done with school bonds. Local school bonds, we lowered the threshold back in 2000, and that's worked well. So I think it's important now to do the same for housing.
So that would allow local governments to put, or people in local areas to put forward a bond possibility to build affordable housing and some other
and pass it with a majority of 55% instead of having to get 2/3,
which is impossible, right? I mean, you cannot get 2/3. Yeah.
I mean, it's been done, but it's difficult, and I think everyone agrees that there would be substantially more bonds that would pass if we lowered it to 55%.
Yeah.
And that's that one could be close because it's got a lot of opposition from interests who basically are worried that property taxes would go up because that's how the bonds would be paid back. And I think that really emphasizes that, this is kind of the California electorate, those who vote, it tends to be whiter, older, and more affluent than the population as a whole. So with 2/3 requirement, you allow that minority of people who probably already have housing, right?
Yeah.
It's quite satisfactory. they could vote to keep their taxes lower and not
Yeah.
approve a bond that might be real necessary to build the housing for people with lower incomes and younger people who are right now being shut out of the housing market.
It always fascinates me the way people are, they're not to be homeless people. And then they want their property to continue to increase in value, and they want to be able to retain all of that. And then their property tax going up relative to the value of the home is suddenly, completely anathema. Like that can't happen. But how else are you going to get these people that people don't want to see on the streets homes unless you start using some public money to be able to do it? I mean, it's not going to happen. So this is crucial. And isn't there also another proposition that might make local areas be able to make housing more affordable?
Right. So the measures that I talked about so far were all put on the ballot by the state legislature.
Actually, Bill, sorry, let me interrupt you. I was supposed to take a station break right now. When we come back, we'll talk about that other measure. But right now, we want to acknowledge our New Thought Media Network.
New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Thank you, New Thought Media Network. And for guests just tuning in, we're talking to environmental leader Bill Magavern, currently about the California ballot. And we had just talked about a bond that would help local areas potentially, a proposition that would help them create a bond to raise money for affordable housing. What was the other proposition or anything else that would help with affordable housing in California, or could?
Well, the measures that were put on the ballot by the initiative process, there is one that would repeal an obstacle to rent control. So this is Proposition 33, which I'm personally supporting, because we have a law in California where the state legislature came in and barred cities and counties from enacting new rent controls on both single-family homes and apartments built after 1995. And Prop 3 would repeal that. So it would not on its own make any rent control happen. It would simply return the power to cities and counties so that they could tailor their policies to what's best in their own regions. I think that cities should be able to enact rent controls if their city councils decide that that's the best thing to do. The state should take that out of their hands. So, there's a lot we need to do to make housing more affordable. This is one piece because it would remove an obstacle, which unfortunately the legislature has refused to remove because the landlord lobby is very powerful in the legislature.
Right. Yeah, it's ridiculous how much power the landlords have in a Democratic controlled legislature in California. A lot of people think that the only thing that can get done is progressive, but actually they still manage to peel off quite a lot of votes. All right, what else on the California ballot?
There's a very controversial measure Proposition 36, which would basically reverse some criminal justice reforms that were passed on a prior measure, Prop 47, some years ago. And Prop 36 would send us back towards stiffer sentences for possession of drugs, certain drugs, and also for retail theft. So we have a situation in California where you may hear people saying, "Oh, crime is out of control." What the data show is that actually violent crime is down in California, most of the state, and most of the country, which is great. Unfortunately, property crime is up in most of the state, and so it's understandable why people want to see solutions for that. I don't think that the solutions offered by Prop 36 are helpful, because we saw in the past that just filling our prisons actually doesn't make us safer, when we're talking here about nonviolent crimes. And I think that prosecution that actually, law enforcement catching people that are committing the crimes and adjudicating those crimes is more effective than just raising the sentences and saying, well, we're going to lock them up for longer. And Prop 36 would cost the state a lot of money from higher costs in the prisons, and actually take away from the spending on drug treatment and mental health and rehabilitation programs that are meant to keep people out of prison. So it's supported by law enforcement and the big box retailers, and it's opposed by a lot of folks who want to defend the criminal justice reforms that we've had in the past. Sarah, I suddenly can't hear you.
Sorry. Thank you. I just to remind everybody, Bill Magavern is an environmental leader who has been speaking in his personal capacity about the California ballot propositions and what's at stake in the presidential election for the environment. And he is also the policy director for the Coalition for Clean Air in California. Bill, is there anything coming up that the Coalition for Clean Air is particularly focused on that you would like to alert us to?
Sure. And when we're talking about the election, I should point out that the one position that we have organizationally is strong support for Proposition 4, the climate bond. So we're urging our members and supporters to vote for that.
Aren't you even listed on the ballot for that? The right. Coalition for Clean Air?
Yes, my colleague Chris Chavez is in the ballot statement as the signer of the rebuttal against the no campaign. So
excellent.
Yes, we're happy to be involved in that. We're working. I talked earlier about the fact that the biggest cause of the harmful emissions that are causing both the air pollution that makes sick at the local level, and California still has the worst air pollution in the entire country, as well as the existential threat of global warming. Most of those emissions come from the same sources. And the biggest source in California and nationally is our transportation system. So to clean that up, we need both to clean up the engines and the fuels that are used in transportation, and also to provide alternative ways of getting around, so that we don't just have everybody having to get into their own personal vehicle. So we need to make it safer and more convenient and more affordable for people to walk or bike or take public transit to their destinations. And unfortunately, we've had a history, and really still being done in California and most of the country, of investing more in road widening. And people tend to think Well, traffic is bad, so if we add another lane, then we'll be able to get there more quickly. But the fact is, I mean, this has been very well documented. There's something called induced demand, that when you expand the capacity, it doesn't take long for the vehicles just to show up and use it and then clog that. So now you just got more lanes that are clogged. And instead,
isn't that called "if you build it, they will come"?
Yes, that is accurate. And we've seen that the 405 freeway in Los Angeles is considered a textbook example of that. But we keep making that mistake of just, paving over more and more places. In addition to that, people think of transportation as being mainly about personal transportation, our cars, but the bigger polluter actually is from the movement of goods. So we have in California, the biggest source of pollution is the freight system. We have massive amounts of goods that come in by container ships, often from Asia, docking at our ports. And of course, we have mega ports at Los Angeles, Long Beach, and Oakland, and other ports also along the coast. And the ships are burning dirty fuel. They dock and they use equipment that often is burning dirty diesel fuel to put the goods onto trucks, trains. We think of trains as being cleaner. Actually, unfortunately, the big railroad companies are using trains with very dirty engines in California. And so whether it's trucks or trains, they're burning dirty diesel fuel and moving those goods to giant warehouses and distribution centers, which are popping up all over, particularly in inland parts of the state, like in San Bernardino counties and the San Joaquin Valley.
Yeah.
And they generate a lot of pollution from the truck traffic coming in.
Yeah.
So we really need to keep up that freight system. And one thing that people can do is, if you're ordering something online, think about, maybe not taking the "I need to get it right away" option, which will be the dirtiest method of getting it to you. Airplane travel is highly polluting. Plan in advance so that you can get it a few days later and try to group those packages, or even, try to get it locally. Although, unfortunately, I know a lot of the stores have made it easier to buy stuff online than in their physical stores.
Yeah.
But we need to pay attention to reducing that pollution for the freight system.
Just
and that's something we're working on.
Yeah.
That's something we're working on at Coalition for Clean Air all the time.
Yeah. And you're able to make a lot of progress, not just through the California legislature, but through the Clean Air Board of California, right?
The California Air Resources Board has a lot of authority to regulate sources of air pollution in California, and often is willing to do that. So we have worked on a number of standards in recent years that will help to clean up trucks and trains and cars and buses and smaller pieces of equipment that the people don't even think of. So these all have opposition, and even now are being resisted. I talked about how we need approvals at the federal level. We're still waiting for the US EPA to give approvals. We're facing lawsuits on a lot of these rules. So it's not easy, but we're pushing forward on that.
People really push back. I mean, the vested interests really push back. When you were talking about the dirty freight in the harbors, it just brought to my mind, because I as you know, I've gone to Catalina a couple times for these annual retreats I like there. And when I'm on the ferry from the port of Los Angeles to Catalina, and actually on Catalina, you could just see ship after ship after ship, huge cargo ships lined up, and all billowing smoke. You can see the smoke coming out of them, and all just waiting to get in to unload, and staying there for long periods of time. And they make sounds, you can tell they're consuming massive amounts of energy and billowing, and it's just really disgusting. And I try to picture that when I'm ordering something online that might come from overseas, that's really what I'm inviting into my waterways. We're in the final 15 minutes here, and I would like to pivot to I would like to stop saying the word pivot and turn my attention to a couple of questions that I'm trying to ask each guest.
Okay, hold on a quick second, Sarah, because I would like Bill to share with us if we do want to read more about the shipping pollution to really help that, instill in us what you were talking about, because it's extremely important. Where would you recommend we go?
Sure. So first of all, thanks for putting up the website of the Air Resources Board. There's a lot there. It's not the most user-friendly site, but the valuable information is there. Coalition for Clean Air's website is at ccair.org, ccair.org. We also work closely with a group called Pacific Environment, which directly addresses the pollution coming from global shipping. So I would also recommend checking them out.
Thanks, Sunny. So as you know, I promised relatively little woo today, but as you know, this is the Conscious Reality Show, and part of what we're focused on is how do we change the reality that we're in. And you, of course, have focused a lot on advocacy as a way to successfully change a number of aspects of the reality. But what's the best thing you believe about your ability to use a higher part of your mind or consciousness to improve the world or what you see?
Well, I think if we look at what has made change happen, whether it be at the local level or nationally or globally, it really has often come from movements that started with communities and grassroots activists and citizens taking action. And certainly when it comes to the environmental movement, that's the case. If you look at the wave of environmentalism that crested around 1970 with the first Earth Day and resulted in a remarkable series of environmental laws that we still rely on. I talk about the U.S. Clean Air Act, and the most important parts of that act were actually passed in 1970, around the same time as Clean Water Act and a lot of others were passed. And that really was a response to Earth Day, which was part of a wave of environmental activism. And we've seen in recent years climate activists, many of them very young. I mean, Greta Thunberg, who started when she was a teenager in Sweden and doing a remarkable job of getting attention to the dangers of runaway climate change. So, and obviously we got a long way still to go, but I think what gives me hope is seeing people, particularly the young people, who actually care enough. And I see this sometimes in my own work. I go to a hearing at the Air Resources Board, and there are high school students who have taken the time to go and to testify, to use the 2 minutes that were granted for public testimony to address the board about how important it is for them to be able to breathe. A lot of them have asthma. Not to mention the global existential crisis of climate change that really, shadows their entire future. So I think that, that kind of organizing continues to be extremely important, and that, we can turn the government officials around if we have enough of that activism, despite all the powerful forces that we're up against.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah. And you talked a lot about what other people could do. Your mind, how do you keep the focus? how do you keep yourself, what do you do to keep yourself able to do this work and have the losses and, win some and lose some and keep doing it for the long haul?
Yeah, I think it is important to try to take the long view. I started in this movement when I was in my 20s and working for a group that was founded by Ralph Nader, and those groups kind of infamously had an ethic of working people so hard that there was some risk of burnout. And I made the decision back then that I was in it for the long haul, so I wasn't going to burn out. So it's not that I didn't work hard in those days, but I didn't take it to extremes and balanced it with having a family, having a life outside of work. And now I definitely pursue that kind of balance and find that it's possible both to do very meaningful work and to do the other kinds of things that I enjoy doing in my life. And because of that, I do not see any need on the horizon to retire. I can keep doing this work by keeping that balance.
Excellent. Well, I'm counting on that, and always amazed to watch you and see the effect that you have on the world. And while I can attest, he has always remained an incredibly dedicated husband and father to our children, no matter what was going on in the world or how early it was to panic. So, which is amazing for me because I'm in recovery from workaholism and panicolism and believing that you have to drop everything to do everything. So Bill has always been a role model for me. Thank you so much, Bill, for joining us today. We're at the end of our broadcast, and we're going to, and next week we have Angeli Tierra joining us, who is a spiritual coach, meditation teacher, folk herbalist, solo pagan practitioner, and Kriya Yogi practitioner. Oh, well, she's a Kriya Yogi. She is a yogi. Can't wait to talk to her and see what she's up to. And maybe she will do some consciousness practices on me, and maybe I will do some consciousness practices on her. This has been the Conscious Reality Show, and I am Sarah Stevens Nichols, and I am so grateful for you watching and for my guest, Bill Magavern.
Thanks to our guest, to host Sarah Stevens Nichols, and to the New Thought Media Network. I'm Sunny Childs, producer of The Conscious Reality Show. Join us live next Wednesday at 9 a.m. or stream the show at your convenience. Subscribe to Conscious Reality Show YouTube channel so you never miss a show. If you'd like to learn more about us, check out www.sarahstevensnichols.com.